Welcome to the Devil's Gate History Club. I want to start off by reminding you that this is a completely self-funded project, and there is a can in the back where you can deposit whatever kind of cash or check you have to help support this ongoing series. My name is Paul Boat, and I have the honor of introducing Kevin Kuharic to all of you. Kevin is the executive director of the Hotel de Paris Museum in Georgetown, Colorado. In his role, he is the chief administrative officer responsible for the site, which is owned and operated by the National Society of the Colonial Dames of America. He also works on behalf of the National Trust for Historic Preservation as one of its site directors. Some of Kevin's notable contributions and achievements in these roles include spearheading a multi-year project to address water intrusion and stabilization of the Hotel de Paris Museum, including excavations, archaeology, and interior and exterior rehabilitation and restoration. Working with History Colorado to create interpretive panels sharing diverse cultural history of Louis Dupuis' Hotel de Paris. Developing and maintaining a social media presence and blog for the museum, which features historical research and commentaries. Reinventing the museum's narrative to focus on the human story of Louis Dupuis, the hotel's proprietor, emphasizing his struggles and resilience to make the site's history more relatable to visitors. Securing grants and donations and growing the museum's earned income through admissions, events, and museum shop sales. Kevin is also a published author, having written A Clutter of Patchwork Squares, a chronicle of Atlanta's Oakland Cemetery, where he spent many years. The book offers an uplifting story of the search for dignity and honor set against an unflinching look at the politics of race, religion, and class separation at Oakland Cemetery, one of the South's most famous burial grounds. Kevin.
So I would be remiss in not thanking Christine Bradley.
What?
So,
You're welcome.
and here's why. Chris sent me one of my first emails in this position as executive director. Somehow we got in a conversation where she found out I was interested in marginalized groups and sharing a fuller American story. And so one of the first emails I received was all kinds of research that she had done already on the Chinese in Georgetown. And so that's what really got me started. And then I think it was 2 years ago now, I think it was 2024, she invited me to appear on K-Goat with her, and the subject was the Chinese in Clear Creek County. And so that was the first time I really went public with my research and my interest in this topic. For many years, my own fear of embracing this held me back because I'm not Asian. And so a lot of criticism can be heaped on people who are doing research out of their lane, so to speak, and that held me back for probably a good decade. But through encouragement of Chris and colleagues at the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and also the support of the Colonial Dames, I was told, and they were right, if not you, whom? And this is your job, so go do it. And so this is really the second time I'm publicly speaking on the topic, so here we go. Oops. There we go. So you are at From Hong Kong to High Country, the Impact of Chinese Citizens of Georgetown, Colorado. Chinese men and women left the port of Hong Kong, traveled to San Francisco, California, and eventually dispersed throughout the western United States in search of opportunity. Some of these people ended up in Clear Creek County, in the mining camps of Empire, Lawson, Downeyville, Dumont, Idaho Springs, Silver Plume, and Georgetown. Chinese men worked as laborers, miners, cooks, gardeners, porters, laundrymen, herbalists, and entrepreneurs. One man also became the first Chinese American person in Colorado to run for public office here in Georgetown's Selectman Ward 2. Unfortunately, Chinese women were not well documented, therefore current understanding of their roles is limited and somewhat speculative. So I'm here today representing both Hotel de Paris Museum and the National Trust for Historic Preservation And I'm working with folks in both organizations to tell a fuller American story that is just and humane. So initially, many Chinese men left the port of Hong Kong, traveled to San Francisco, and they were here for gold. They were here to mine. And so On Gold Mountain is a great book, if you want to read that, about men traveling across the sea in order to find opportunity here in the United States. So initially, many were miners. And so this is going to be about 1849 with the 49ers in California. As gold played out and as people migrated further into the United States, other opportunities came up, such as working in vineyards. So this is a shot of a vineyard in North California. And this perhaps has impacted what wines were sold at Hotel Paris. The majority of the wines that were sold there were from California, so I believe that there is a connection between this workforce and the wines that were served. Oops, sorry. Then the Transcontinental Railroad, connecting the coasts. And once that's complete, then what do? You find other opportunities. You go into other lines of work. What does that look like? In Denver, retail, opening shops in Chinatown. This is a man who is anonymous at this point, but you can tell that he had some dispensable income in order to go and have a seated portrait in his studio, probably to send back home to his family to show that he's fine and that he's successful. Laundries, this is a huge one for Georgetown. And these two buildings still stand. The one on the left is in Como, which had a very large Chinese population, and the one on the right is in Colorado City, and it has been preserved. And then some things to keep in mind about what impacts primarily a male population of Chinese immigrants. In 1875, the Page Act prohibited immigration to the United States of anyone from Asia involved in forced labor, female sex work, often called prostitution, and those guilty of criminal offense in their country of origin. So this is going to limit women coming across the ocean. Another thing that happened in 1880, the Denver race riot, where a white mob heavily damaged and destroyed parts of Denver's Chinatown. It displaced Chinese residents and workers, and keep in mind, it's going to give them a sense of fear, instability, and no sense of safety. So the riot caused the State Department to discontinue entry of Chinese citizens into the United States. So it was a very big event. And in fact, it destroyed Denver's Chinatown, which is just now being reestablished by a group called Colorado Asian Pacific United, or CAPU. And then 2 years after the race riot, the Chinese Exclusion Act. The United States Congress restricts immigration based on race and class. President Roosevelt made it permanent in 1904, and the law remained in place until 1943. So what is this going to do to the men who have traveled across the ocean? It's going to alienate themselves from their families, prohibit their wives and children to travel across to join them. So it's a big setback. I think it's fairly common knowledge that Louis Dupuy employed Chinese labor and had a Chinese employee. But is he a white savior? Not necessarily. When he was a reporter for the Rocky Mountain News, Louis Dupuy quit the newspaper in 1872 over the publication supported the Sand Creek Massacre, as well as anti-Chinese immigration articles published by editor William N. Byers. Later, as a proprietor of Hotel de Paris, Dupuy employed a Chinese gardener and porter known as John Tao, we don't know his given name, and Chinese laborers and builders who expanded and improved his business during an exclusionary and threatening time in Colorado. So he was employing these men post-Exclusion Act. Even though Dupuy would have experienced negative criticism here in our own community from people wanting to protect jobs for white men and women, He also saved money by hiring Chinese workers who worked more cheaply than whites. And so on the left was his Chinese employee, John Tao. We know about him a couple of ways. One is through the 1885 Colorado census, where his name appears, the name bestowed upon him. We don't know his given name. And to clarify, the name John, it is a slur, the same as Charlie. John and Charlie are slurs, and so you will hear and see those names in this presentation. Just have a point of reference for that. And so he appears in that census. His job was gardener, his place of work, and his home, Hotel de Paris. We know that he lived in the annex building, which is the building behind the kitchen. On maps, it is identified as sleeping rooms. It was 3 rooms, and he occupied sleeping room number 1. We also have this photo of him. And so it's a cabinet card. You can see professionally done. We're not sure at this point who Eli and Tippett are. I found those names in Nevada. And so it's possible that he was working on the Transcontinental Railroad and then migrated by way of Nevada into Colorado to find other work. At this point, our belief is that he was probably present or aware of the race riot in Denver, was likely displaced by that event, came up to the mountains for safety and other opportunity. And since we know that Louis Dupuis quit the newspaper over anti-Chinese immigration articles, Louis Dupuis offers him this job, gives him food, pays him in a place to stay that's safe. This is a very well-known photograph of Georgetown Chinese men. In my research, this comes up over and over and over. Several years ago, I went to the Chinese Historical Society in San Francisco. This was the first photo I encountered in their exhibit. And it was like old friends when I saw them, because we have this on exhibit at Hotel de Paris as well. We don't know all the names of the men. At this point, I'm still trying to determine what their professions were. But there are 2 names here, the 2 center fellows here. This would be Hua Chen, and this would be Tang Yashun right here. Okay? But I want to point out that they're starting to adopt Western clothing. Okay? So there's a little bit of assimilation going on, and that's going to be for success and acceptance in America. It's also a studio portrait, and so again, it's going to be something that costs money, but my guess is that's why you have 5 men here. They probably all chipped in, all got the same photo and shared that photo with their families. This was the Daglish studio, so a lot of you doing research come across that. That building stood where Happy Cooker's courtyard is today. So it was at the corner of 6th and Taos, where the courtyard is. Georgetown citizens. These are the names that I've come across so far. So when I started doing this research, I was given the impression by either reading an article before or having a conversation with somebody that there were about 12 Chinese men in Georgetown and an unknown number of Chinese women. And so you can see here that we've got a married couple right here. And then all of these people here, male. So what's missing from this list? Women. So again, the Page Act of 1875 is having an impact here. This is a Colorado picture. This is in Chinatown in Denver. And so other lines of work, besides hotel building, gardening, being porters, and laundry, grading of railroad beds. And so a lot of us know that the Welsh are given credit for building the stone walls, but that may or may not be a complete story. The railroad grading was being done by the Chinese, and folks, you drive through this every time you go to Denver. This is along I-70, and this is called Forks, and it was a refreshment stop. And so the train would stop there, you could have a whiskey, and a bite to eat, and then continue up to Georgetown.
Where is that located on I-70?
Between Idaho Springs and Georgetown.
Oh.
Really between Idaho Springs and Dumont in that stretch. Okay?
It was actually Forks Creek in
That's it.
366. It was down
We're
US
Highway
6.
119.
Ah,
6.
okay.
We're trained nerds, so we see a lot of pictures where it shows that, and then the split. That's the split that goes to Idaho Springs. That's the split that goes
Got
to
it.
Central
Okay.
City.
That
Good.
rock face is still very recognizable.
And so towards the end of the presentation, I'll go ahead and jump ahead just a little bit. My goal is to get research to take what I'm sharing tonight to correct things and expand with ideas in mind. So thank you for that. And then this is the picture from Idaho Springs. And so this is Underhill with Chinese miners. And so mining, and so it's not going to be just placer mining, panning in the creek, but also drilling into the mountainsides.
We actually believe those might have been students for the Colorado School of Mines, because he was a professor at the School of Mines, and that was taken in the Edgar mine.
Yes, this is the Edgar mine.
And you can see they just,
Oops, sorry, go back.
they just adored him. I mean, look how chilled out they are right next to their professor. He's the one in the middle blinking.
Yes. Right there. Okay. And so, back to the laundries. Please recognize that there's entrepreneurship involved and also ownership. So Chinese men opened laundries, they owned them, they operated them, but they were criticized for this success because people were envious of them taking jobs from both men and white men and women. And so keep in mind that at this period in history, that things like cooking, cleaning, sewing, doing laundry were considered in the women's sphere, and that was something that was feminine. And so they felt that the Chinese were stepping into that women's sphere and taking away from women as well as whites. So this is another Colorado ad. This is from Greeley. Here's a laundry run by whites, no Chinese there. And so you might remember in the 20th century, no Irish employed was another sign. So this is a predecessor of that practice. And then this fellow is going to pop up quite a few times. This is probably our most well-known Chinese citizen. And he has a few names. He has his Chinese name, but he also goes by Charlie Gao. Remember, Charlie is a slur. And Leo Gao. Okay? And so this is here in Georgetown. This is Charlie, and this is Charlie's restaurant. So he was the owner, proprietor, and cook here, and it was called the Home Dairy Restaurant. In fact, that's it right there, and there's Charlie, or Leo, right there. Okay? So the Home Dairy was his business, and he is the fellow who ends up running for political office here in Georgetown. So he was a very flamboyant character. You can see he's dressed in Western style clothing. He's smoking openly. He was the first Chinese man in Georgetown to cut off his queue or ponytail. And he ran for political office. He became a U.S. citizen at the age of 4. But when he ran for office, there was racism and public outcry that he was not an American, he was Chinese, and so he was therefore defeated. Another connection to Hotel de Paris, I'll just point out this fellow here. This was our apprentice cook right here. So when he was 16 years old, he moved into Hotel de Paris. He was trained by Louis Dupuis to be the cook in Louis's absence, so the food would always be the same.
Where is this picture?
We're going to get to maps, and I'll show you on the map, okay? And this is another thing I want to point out here, the absence of women. So in Georgetown, you're going to have a lot of groups of men loitering around on the streets, drinking and spitting. Keep your comments to yourselves. And then here's Leo. Oops, sorry. Here's Leo running for office. So he would dress in a top hat and a tuxedo. He held a cane. He would walk the streets of Georgetown campaigning. He also had a campaign manager. And you can see that he is a white man working for a Chinese man, so tables are turning a little bit.
What
Okay.
office did you run for?
He was for selectman of Ward 2, which is right here. I live in Ward 2 and work in Ward 1. He lived in Ward 2 and he worked in Ward 1. So that's sort of a neat connection that I think about. Where in Ward 2 he lived is unknown at this point. Okay. On the maps that we're getting to, I do know in a couple of locations where Chinese men lived, and so I'll be pointing those out. But this is why I need to hire a researcher, and that researcher will be from the Chinese or Chinese American community here in Colorado to take what we have so far and goof-proof it and expand the knowledge and then create some products from it, as I call it. Okay, let's continue. Another business that men went into, Chinese men, was opium providers. Okay, so there were lots of articles about opium being smoked in Georgetown. It was hard to find a picture. This was one of the less offensive pictures, if you can imagine. But what I want to point out to you is the clientele would be largely white. Okay. And then we also had a Chinese doctor here in town. And I'm suspicious of our John Tao at Hotel de Paris that he might have been an herbalist. Remember, he was a gardener. What is he gardening? We used to have a greenhouse adjacent to the kitchen, and he was growing herbs, spinach, chard, and ornamental flowers there. So he was probably practicing as an herbalist, and knowing Louis Dupuy and his interest in health and sanitation, and how good health, good food, and exercise lead to a long and productive life, this is probably something that attracted him to hiring John. I have not read this book yet. It's on my very short list of things to read. It's fairly new. And then cultural borrowing. This is another picture by Dalgleish, a group of young men posing with a very beautiful Asian-style umbrella. And so usually you hear the term cultural appropriation. I decided on cultural borrowing just to give people, once we do the research, the chance to sort of, historically express why they're making these choices. Were they exploiting a culture? Were they admiring a culture? We don't know at this point, so I don't want to assign that to them. So we're going to call it cultural borrowing. So here's some cultural borrowing. Are they making fun of the culture? Are they admiring the culture? Who's to say at this point? Here's a young woman from Georgetown. She has a dragon pendant at her neck here. So again, some cultural borrowing. And is she doing it to make fun of a culture, or does she admire that culture? We can speculate, but again, research may lead us to that answer. The 4th of July parade in Georgetown. Many, many pictures of floats, including this one. And I will say it's in an Asian style, perhaps Chinese, perhaps Japanese, maybe a mix of the two. But you can see the makeup, the hairstyles, the mode of dress, the parasols again. And then this is back to Hotel de Paris. This is in sample room 2. This is in 1905. This is a party and a meeting of the Sweet 16 Club, which was a group for 16-year-old young girls, women in this town. These are the 3 young men who are waiting on them, serving them an indoor picnic. And you can see it's also in an Asian style, perhaps Japanese or Chinese, or a mix of the two. So this is the Burkholder family. They start leasing Hotel de Paris in 1901 after the deaths of Louis Dupuy and Sophie Galley. They pay it off in 1905, and this is one of the first events that they hold there. Unknown if this is the same party or not, but you can see it's the same aesthetic, where you have Chinese lanterns hanging from a porch, which has been removed from the hotel. It was built about 1905 and removed in 1954. And again, you've got some kimonos, some parasols, the lanterns, and so again, this borrowing of culture. And then this is another Burkholder picture. This one perhaps leans more towards mocking and making fun of Asian culture. This is going to be 1932 or before. I know that simply because this is Sarah Burkholder. She dies in 1932. So let's get up to present day here and the commitment of Hotel de Paris and the National Trust to tell a fuller American story. There's a website, an organization, historypin.org. I highly recommend it. You can upload information about historic sites anywhere in the world, and it's something that you can do for free. And so I've created a collection of pins for the sites of Chinese contribution in Georgetown, Colorado. So here we go to our maps. So I used historic and contemporary sources. So the locations have been determined by cross-referencing Sanborn Map Company street plans, historic images, and newspaper accounts. Renumbering of street addresses in Georgetown, Colorado should be considered when comparing historic locations with three-dimensional images, satellite views, aerial photography, and GIS data from Google Earth. So, let's see here. This is where the county offices are in Georgetown, okay? So here's Argentine Brownell, here's 6th Street. And so these icons are showing you locations of different things. Right here, you see a mining icon. Right here, along Clear Creek. This area was once called Chinatown. And it's not the Chinatown that you would imagine in San Francisco or Chicago or New York. It was not a place of commerce. It's a very rocky area, elevated above the creek, and a good place to pan for gold. I don't believe any archaeology has been done there. I hope someday to be involved with something like that. I would like to find out if there were any temporary structures, canvas tents, or maybe even wood structures that haven't survived. I'm suspicious that there could be some artifacts there, perhaps coins or pieces of porcelain, pieces of rice bowls perhaps that were dropped, mining supplies, but it's a very brief mention of Chinatown. And just from the barrenness of the area, it is not likely that it was a place inhabited for very long, okay? And then up here, you'll see a food icon. That was Leo Gao's restaurant. So there was a saloon here, and then his restaurant right next to it. So this is now the parking lot at the county offices, and then this right here would be the post office. So his restaurant specialized in chop suey. Okay, chop suey and chicken. Oops, sorry. Oh, shoot. There we go. Right here, where Mountain Mamas used to be, in that yellow house, there is a courtyard to the west, right above the creek. It's an open area. There used to be a Chinese laundry there. And then right across, you can see a long building that spans the creek. That was Hope Ho's, one of our firehouses that has not survived. And the town leased rooms upstairs, and Lee Hai, one of our Chinese fellows here, he boarded there. So a Chinese resident there. The building that we're in is the county courthouse, but it's been moved. So here it is in its original location. We're here right now, but it was here. And there was a hearing, a trial in this room, a murder trial, where a Chinese man was a witness and testified, right here where you're sitting. And then south of us, there's a little driveway, also part of the county complex, and there was another laundry there, and I'll show you what is there today. So this is Chinatown, also known as High Hill. This is the building that spanned the creek. So it's where the bridge is on 6th Street, okay? Ho-Ho's, and so this was, one of these rooms was lived in by Lehigh. Here's the picture on the wall right here. So here's Charlie Gao, or Leo Gao, right here. And this is a Guanella right here. And in fact, we had a conversation, I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, and I was asking, you know, if this was the Guanella restaurant, and we determined that it was not, that it was Leo's restaurant. And then the courthouse that we're in, but this is in its original location. This is the vacant area next to the where Mountain Mama's was, and so there was a Chinese laundry here. You may know this little garage on Argentine, right here where the driveway was. There was another little structure. Again, it was a Chinese laundry. I'm going to try to get access to this building because I'm wondering if this hasn't been pushed back and modified, and maybe if there's some traces that this might be the Chinese laundry. Just updated for today's use, so I have a little bit of research to do there. Okay. Any questions about those locations? Fairly clear on where all that is? Okay. So here's another part of town. It becomes more dense in the west side of town. So that was the east side. So let's start at the bottom here. Mountain Mama's is here today. So this is an old billiards hall. Right across from Mountain Mama's is a basketball court. Within the confines of that basketball court, there were 2 Chinese laundries. Okay, so one right across, and then one right next to Alpine Hose. This is Alpine Hose number 2. The basketball hoop is about here, and it was a Chinese laundry and a Chinese altar. So in the back of the Chinese laundry, there was an altar where the Chinese community would go, and they would pray. They would write their prayers on slips of red paper, put them in bronzer, and burn them and send their prayers to the sky. Men would pray for success, money. Women would pray for health and children. On Rose Street, about where Strauss Park is, there was another Chinese laundry. So basically across from 511. And it was also a place where you could smoke opium. So it was a laundry and opium. And then here, this is where John Tomei Public Library is today. The west part of the library, the part that is adjacent to Library Corner Park, there was a laundry there. Anne Marie Cannon is in the room. She lived in the Mahaney building, and Paul is responsible for the Mahaney building. There's a vacant area just to the south of it. There was a Chinese laundry there where that yard is, that fenced-in yard. And then the biggest concentration is right here, and this is Hotel de Paris. And so we have the hammer because as much as 80% of Hotel de Paris was built by Chinese labor. We have a laundry in the back of the kitchen. Research will tell us if it is the last surviving Chinese laundry in Georgetown. We know it's not the last in the state because we saw the one in Como and the one in Colorado City. So more research there, and it really comes down to that little garage. Is it really the laundry that's just been pushed back and modified or not? It was a place where John Tao resided, and he was also a porter there and a gardener. And then right across the street, there's a yellow building that has a courtyard. It's where it is what it is now. That courtyard, there was a Chinese laundry there as well, right across the street from Hotel de Paris. Okay. Now let's look at the photos. What's
Why
there
was
today?
there so many laundry?
They're all near hotels, within feet, so they know where the business is going to be. And so you might want to go back to, Christine knows what I'm going to say, to my presentation, Commodious Accommodations. I think it was the first presentation I gave here. And
It's available online.
It's available online, and it gets into where all the hotels were. So all of these things are reliant on each other. Okay. So here's what are in those locations today. So you're all very familiar with Hotel de Paris, the biggest concentration of surviving Chinese history in town. This is St. James Hotel today. This is a Chinese laundry. This was here in the 1940s still. It's not here now. It's the parking lot behind Anomaly and Gary Haynes. You know Town Hall. There was a little building here. That's the yellow complex. This is the courtyard, and this is the laundry. So that courtyard is the same footprint as the laundry that was there. Okay. This is the basketball court next to Alpine Hose number 2. So this is going to be your laundry and your altar. This is your laundry and your opium provider, right here. Same piece of land. This part of John Tomei, there was a laundry with a yard behind, the yard of course for clotheslines. And then there was a Chinese laundry right here, that yard next to the Mahaney building. That's fenced in right there. So, back to Hotel de Paris. It's a vestige of Chinese history in Georgetown, Colorado, and it's committed to raising awareness of the town's multiculturalism. We're going to do this by hiring a member of the Chinese community in Colorado to research and write a guided tour to be conducted through the town's historic commercial district, which, as you've seen, is a physically accessible area 5 blocks across and 3 blocks wide, and located in the Georgetown Silver Plume National Historic Landmark District, which was established by the National Park Service in 1966. The guided tour will further the museum's effort to tell a fuller American story by sharing accounts of Chinese contributions to Georgetown's success as a great silver mining camp during the Pikes Peak Gold Rush. So this is the back of Hotel de Paris. All right. So this is all Chinese constructed. This is all Chinese constructed. This is all Chinese constructed, the sleeping rooms, and likely the back half of the kitchen right there, plus the courtyard walls and the cellar. That's why I say as much as 80%. That might even be a conservative number. So here is the cellar. From newspaper accounts, we know that it was excavated by Chinese labor. Oops. So this part is under the oldest part, so this probably pre-existed. So the original part of the building was a bakery known as Delmonico Bakery, and at least some of this, probably this part existed, but it was all tied together by Chinese labor into the boiler room, the butcher shower, the wine cellar. Okay, so this is going to displace a lot of material, mainly rocks, and we'll get into that in a second. Where did the rocks go? Okay, so that's all Chinese built. First floor. Oops. All of this is Chinese built, 1889 edition. All of this is Chinese built, 1882 edition. Again, this is pre-existing. And then this is likely Chinese built back here in the kitchen. Oops. There we go. Second floor, again, this is going to be Chinese built. We don't have room 5 here because it's a storage room, so we didn't scan it. And then all of this is Chinese constructed as well. And so what it looks like today, the annex building and the courtyards, all Chinese. Okay? Plus, keep in mind that our gardener, John Tao, occupied this room right here. Okay, room number 1. Unfortunately, that building burned in 1942, so anything of historic value within that structure was destroyed. Since it's a masonry building, the shell stood open to the elements for another 12 years until the National Society of the Colonial Dames of America and the state of Colorado purchased the property in 1954. They put a temporary roof on the structure at that point. That roof stayed in place until 1999. And the roof that's on it now, what I call the permanent roof, went in 1999. And then material culture. So here are traces within the building. So we not only have the site, the built environment, we also have traces of life. So back to the slide from California, the vineyards. Most of our wines were from California. You can see these are all California wines. We talked about Forks Creek. We have this shot glass from Forks Creek that you should come see. It's a whiskey glass, and so there's Clear Creek right there, and you can see Forks Creek. I think it says eatery or eating establishment in the proprietor's name. And so it has a connection to Chinese history because they did the grading of the rail beds. These are poker chips that were discovered during an interior repair and renovation of the laundry. So they're homemade. They're just pieces of cardboard, and they're painted different colors for different values. So $1, $3, $5. They were hidden in the laundry. Now, is Louis Dupuis, the proprietor, going to hide something in his own building? And is he going to be using homemade poker chips? Unlikely. Okay? And so at this point, our belief is that John Tao, our gardener, that greenhouse that I told you about was eventually torn down to expand the kitchen in order to put in the laundry. And so that happens in about 1887. He's there in 1885. So if he doesn't leave at that moment because his gardening is taken away, hopefully we'll find out through research that he just sort of pivots and he becomes the laundry worker for Hotel de Paris as well as the porter. So at this point we believe that these chips are his. Okay? And that shows another social aspect for these groups of men in Georgetown getting together to gamble in their spare time and free time. So here's my commitment. So I'm going to continue to collect, preserve, and share history associated with Chinese history in Georgetown, Colorado. We feel an obligation because we are such an important and obvious vestige of that history. I'm going to continue to build relationships with the Chinese community in Colorado. I will continue to, and I have already applied for grants to fund a researcher from Colorado's Chinese community to expand our understanding of Georgetown's Chinese community. I will continue to work with the town of Georgetown to develop a permanent historical marker to commemorate the contributions of Georgetown's Chinese citizens. And I would like to create a guided tour of the locations that you've seen outlined in this presentation, highlighted by history pin. You can visit that at any time, and have the tour be called Sites of Chinese History in Georgetown, Colorado. So now I'm asking for a commitment from you. I ask after this presentation that you begin to reframe your view of Georgetown's history to include stories of Chinese citizens. I want you to get curious about the possibility that other historic buildings, maybe where you work, where you live, where you worship, may have direct or indirect connections to Georgetown's Chinese community. And if you have knowledge of Georgetown's Chinese history, please share it with me at Hotel de Paris Museum. And guess what tomorrow is? New Year's Day, people. So it's New Year's Eve, so I'm sure you're all going to go out and have a drink tonight, right? Tomorrow is Lunar New Year, New Year's Day, and it's going to be the year of the fire horse. And so I just wanted to make you aware of that. So start thinking more broadly, if you would. So I'm ready for any questions.
But thank you for.
You mentioned that you might know where Leo lived in Ward 2?
No. Research will tell us. And I don't know if where he lived has survived the present day either. And so the map of Ward 2, lots of missing buildings as it appears today. So this is part of why we're trying to raise some money. We've had a couple of disappointing things happen in the last year with this work. In July, I applied for a grant to hire a researcher from a funder that specified that they wanted to fund untold stories. So this seemed like a slam dunk. So I asked for the maximum, which was $12,500, and we got nothing. There were other organizations that were chosen. And so that was a very disappointing event for me. I will not call it a setback. It felt like it at the time, but it has actually put more of a fire beneath my hind end. And so I've sort of doubled down on my commitment to see this through after that. So in a way, it's been a weird gift. I'm not sure why they turned us down. I reached out and got no response, so I don't know what that's about. And then also, I was working with Kasia at the town and with Dennis to try to erect a permanent marker this year, 2026, since it's the 150th anniversary of Colorado and the 250th of the USA. And I got to almost the finish line with an organization that gives these markers. They provide them free of charge. The holdup was there was nobody in the state of Colorado to review my research to make sure that it was sound. So that was the tripping point. So it's not going to happen this year. I was trying to actually time both things, the guided tour as well as the marker, to be our civic contributions this year, and that's just not going to happen. Okay. All right.
Do census records indicate are the accurate number of Chinese residents?
If I could cross-reference names, yes, I would say so. And sometimes it'll say nativity, and that would be the place of origin, their birth country. And so I have not done that. Again, I would turn that over to a researcher from that community to do that for us. So I'm not going to stop researching. I'm always going to be interested in this, and I will continue to research until I hand the reins over. Okay. All right, yes.
How did the population density of Chinese Americans compare to other areas in Denver or other
Ooh,
non-towns?
well, pretty low. We didn't have a large enough community to have, let's say, proper Chinatown where you had, all kinds of a concentration of Chinese-owned businesses and residents. We never had that here. As you saw, it was dispersed greatly. Where they lived, where they worked. That's another question I think research can give us some lens on. At this point, I don't know, but it does look like the amount of Chinese men is around 14 at this point, so not too far off of the 12 that I was led to believe. And I only have that one Chinese woman's name so far, just because there was, an article about them getting married.
Did the female population get any larger? Do we know, or just 14?
We don't know. We don't know. And that same census, the 1885 Colorado census, didn't record any Chinese women, but we know they were here through newspaper articles mentioning them. So they were sometimes tied to sex work and sometimes tied to the opium dens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you give some more context on the Charlie John? Was this a thing that they chose?
Yeah, no, it's something that white people burdened Chinese men with. So I don't know if you're familiar with old Hollywood movies and things, but like Charlie Chan, the Charlie Chan movies, Charlie was just, it's a slur. And I learned that in New York City, in New York City's Chinatown. There's a museum of, it's called MoCA, Museum of Chinese in America. And I went there to do research, and one of their exhibits explained that Charlie and John were slurs. I was unaware of that before.
So something kind of pressed onto them to some.
Yes, and to put them in their place. You're not using their correct name. You're not putting any effort into learning their name or how to pronounce their name. You're bestowing a name upon them. It's a nickname that you're not, that is being put on you. Yes, and you're being put in your place, basically. So it's not a good thing. So we're very careful at Hotel de Paris when we talk about our gardener, John, it's the only name we know, that we say it's his given name. Or not his given name, but it's how we know him. We don't know his given name at this point, but again, research will reveal that. Okay? And then if people want to know more, we dig into it. And we're not afraid to talk about the hard truths over there. Okay.
Do you have any business cards? I might have a lead on the researcher for you.
That would be great. We have to get funding too, though. So funding and then research. But if they want to do some volunteer work, that would be great. And I do have business cards. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of thoughts here. One is, if you're very interested in this subject and also in the Japanese experience in Colorado, Asians in Colorado start there. This is like the best primer you can start with. There are many books out there. Some are brand new, just got published last year. An editor from the New Yorker just published one. Very, very good book. Beasts in the Field is another one. On Gold Mountain is another one. There are plenty of things on the subject, plenty of books, but this is Colorado specific. Dr. William Way, who has become a friend of mine. He wrote this. He teaches at CU, and he was also the state historian. And so he knows about this research, and it's been very helpful as well.
Was there any like second wave of Chinese immigration after
the earliest account that I have seen in the press was about 1870 here locally. So they're coming over around 1849 into California, and it takes some time for the migration and the disbursement to happen all the way to Colorado and into Georgetown. Okay, and then Leo Gao, our restaurateur and politician, he's running for office in 1912. So it went into the 20th century. Okay, but because of racism, threats, assaults, and murders, and being run out of town, the Chinese population was run out of town in Silver Plume and also in Idaho Springs. It was not as volatile here in Georgetown, but threats were still made. There were nights of drunkenness where some white men threw windows through a house where Chinese men were living, threatening them, again, disturbing that sense of peace and safety. But there were threats of hangings. There were murders.
In Georgetown?
Yes, there was a trial in this room, a murder trial in this room about a Chinese man who was killed. Yes, in this room.
Who was the murderer?
I have to go back and look at my
Was it
notes.
a European,
Yeah.
or was it-
Yes. Yes. And the type of killings, lynchings.
were they convicted?
I have to look again, research. I just know the trial was here, and I know who the witness was, who testified.
There were only two hangings in Georgetown that we know of, so.
And there was another one. I think there was another one in Idaho Springs, and it was a doctor and herbalist who was known to have lots of money hidden in his house. So the motivation is not just racial. That's that's the given. The other was acquiring wealth, taking things which would be money hidden in mattresses and under floorboards and things like that, because they wouldn't necessarily be banking. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
You call them citizens. Did Colorado give them citizenship?
Well, some were Americanized, yes. And then Leo Gao, he became a U.S. citizen at the age of 4. But people weren't willing to accept that fact and use that against him when he ran for public office here in Georgetown. He ran for Selectman of Ward 2 and was defeated because they said he's not eligible, he's not a U.S. citizen, he's not an American, and he was. Okay. Yes, sir.
Have the Sanborn maps helped with verification and all? Because that's how I
Oh
found
gosh,
out.
yes.
That's how I found out that the spot over by where the city hall is now is in Idaho Springs used to be a Chinese laundry.
Yeah,
Was
sure.
one of the Sanborn maps.
Yes. So the Sanborn fire insurance maps is how I know them. You can find them online. It's gotten much easier. And you can zoom in. The problem in Georgetown, numbering systems have changed as well as the street names have changed. And so those are 2 double whammies. And so you really have to look at it from a few different vantage points in order to really zero in. And luckily, if there's a photo, and like I had some photos, they're usually not the subject of the photo, they're just sort of, coincidental in the photo, but it's nice to see those buildings. And if you notice, they were all sort of 1-story structures, quite small in size, frame, So they were pretty consistent in sort of how they appeared. And so that sort of then gives you an idea of how big they were. Okay? But yeah, Sanborn is unbeatable for sure, because they would update those maps periodically so you could see like Hotel de Paris expand over time, and then other things disappear over time. Other buildings disappear over time. So it gives you context. It is a moment in time, though. It's just that one
Did you
snapshot.
know the Denver Central Research Library on the 5th floor actually has physical copy?
That's
like
cool.
Physical, actual old books for the Sanborn maps.
That's great. I was thrilled that they went online.
Oh yeah.
So I was looking at mine through libraryofcongress.gov, but there are some educational institutions here in Colorado that also have them available. You can't always, it depends on where you go, whether you can download it or not download it, or just view it. So I sort of bump around looking at the same thing, but I needed to download because I needed the graphics.
Library of Congress is great.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, anybody else?
LOC.gov.
Yep, LOC.gov. Yes.
Is it true that some of the wagon roads, some of the places where the trail was built out a bit, was recognizable from certain Chinese rock people?
Don't know the answer to
I
that.
have heard that many times on Empire Pass,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
and
Well,
I'm going to look that up in regard to him and see if I can find some more photos that would be helpful to your research.
that would be great. Yeah, if you know anything, like I also reached out to Lois Kruger, who lives very close or on part of Chinatown, and asked her if in all of her gardening or cleaning up of her property, has she ever come across anything like a coin or anything, and her answer was no. Not to say that it's not there. I think archaeology would prove otherwise. I'm sure we'll find traces of them there.
You could go at least a couple feet down.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the process at 4 years old to become a citizen?
Oh no, he became a citizen at 4 years old. I don't know why that moment in time for him, or who did that for him. I guess his parents. I don't know. I don't know. But he's been the easiest individual to find information on, so it's probably out there. Very flamboyant guy. He was a man about town. Everybody would have known. Yeah. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned Chinese people in other parts of Clear Creek County.
Yes.
Did you find anything about the Floyd Hill area?
I have not.
The reason I'm asking
Yeah.
is probably 20 years ago, when CDOT was first beginning to talk about planning changes on I-70, I was doing some research about Floyd Hill, and it seems to me I came across a Chinese man who was a property owner there, and I was trying to trace it back and see
Sure.
how he became involved.
My initial reaction to that is if federal money was involved in that project, there's something called Section 106. And if there's documentation that was made, it would probably include that information. So that would be where I would suggest you start looking. Or me, we'll compare notes. I find that very interesting. Good. Okay, is that it? Okay, thank you very much for your time.